Okay, so what I wanted to do this morning is just walk through setting up a simple React app and then using our two different test frameworks, well, a new one, but we're going to start off with Cypress and thinking about how we can test a simple React app, right? So pay attention, take notes. I'm going to try and upload this as quickly as possible after this finishes. And I'll try and walk through any questions. But most of it is just a demonstration, and then I'll ask you to go do it yourself so you can just practice having a look at how this setup part works, right? Okay. So I'm going to minimize all your faces. So you're going to be over here in the side. I realize it prioritizes people with their camera on. So whoever has their camera on is the only people I can see at the moment. My little squished bar of faces. Okay. Let's have a look. So let me make this a bit bigger so we can see what we're doing here. Too big, but fine. So I'm in an absolutely empty working directory, and what I want to do is set up a React app, and the way that we can speedily do this is by using a little helper tool to set up React. Now, some of the reasons for this is we need to be able to find a way to change some of the JavaScript that is too advanced for some browsers to render it properly. So there are a few helper tools that we're not going to talk about right now, but we may talk about at the end of the week to say, why is some of this setup necessary? All right. For the moment, we're going to use this tool called Create React App. It's a neatly named tool called Create React App like this. And that helps abstract a lot of the sort of setup process away. So we can actually just get closer just to writing our JavaScript, our React, to create these applications. So it's entirely possible not to use Create React App and do all of the setup yourself. It just takes a little bit more time and it's a little bit more configuration heavy. So we're going to not worry about that, and we're just going to use Create React App, and then we'll talk about the reasons for this at the end of the week. So the way we do it is by using our npm script run npx create react app, and then I'm going to create is the name of the app that you want, or the name of the directory. I'm going to do a simple hello world, so we can just see hello world using React. A bit overkill for hello world, but fine. Let's create the name hello world. And it gives you some nice output to your terminal about what's going on. It's creating a React app, installing packages, and installing React and all the things it needs to for this to work. So this might take a little bit of time. Let's see how long it actually takes. So this is creating like a top-level directory. So some students, when they start working with React, end up creating lots of nested React apps because they forget how all the directory structure here. So I'm in a directory where I'm going to keep all React projects. You don't need to do it this way, but sometimes it's nice to organize your directories like this. And then this will be a specific project directory. Loads and loads of things happening. It's almost done. Okay, it added 1,921 packages. And it's given me a bunch more output here. It's saying it's also initialized Git for me, which is nice. Look at that. And it's given me some commands that I can run. So let's have a look at now in my directory, I can see hello world. So let's change into it and have a look at what's just happened. So it's initialized Git for me as well. So I now have a Git initialized repository for my React project. So you can have a look at Git status as well. Nothing to commit. So let's have a look at this project. Go away. What is in here? So at a very simple one command, I've just installed or create React app. I run it, and let's have a look at some of the things that have happened. It's on the .git. We know that it's created a Git repository, node modules. It's installed a bunch of packages. So all of these is what is needed. You can see how many, as we said, 1,922. It's crazy. We have a public folder and a source folder. We'll come back to that in a second. A git ignore. So this is now sort of pre-written for you. Importantly, clearly, it ignores the node modules, and there's a few other things that it ignores. It has the sort of package.json, which lists all the dependencies. We know this already. And we're going to add Cypress to this in a second. And it's got some scripts for us to run as well. The scripts all sort of forward to React scripts to run. Another way to keep your package.json sort of like neat and tidy is just hidden away in another node module that takes care of it. And there's a README, a default README with a bunch of things that you probably can just delete for now. And the main thing that we need to know is that well, we have access to a few npm commands like start and test. Those are the main ones we'll use for the moment. And so let's just run npm start and see what happens. The instruction here says it runs the app in dev mode, and we can view it in our browser. The page will reload if you make edits, which is great. So just by running the dev server, you make any changes, it will reload and show up. So there's none of that. You need to like kill the server and load up again. So let's have a look at running npm start. Where are you now? I thought I had an open one of these. Where'd it go? Did I just kill my other terminal? I thought I had it. Let's navigate back to where I was. Where are we? I've even forgotten. June. React. Okay. It might be somewhere on my desktop. I couldn't find it too quickly. All right, so let's go npm start. Runs the app mode in development. So let's have a look at what's happening. So it should load. Cool. So this is the automatic default for any React app that you start up. All right. So just by running a few commands, we've been able to get a React app up and running. You can now view Hello World in the browser, and it tells you where to go for it. Okay, so let's have a look at the structure of a React app. We created our React app, npx create React app, and then the name of it, and then we just changed into it and we ran npm start. All right, 2 commands, and you have a React app up and running. So let's have a look at the source folder. Now, a lot of this we can just ignore. The last 1, 2, 3 files we can just ignore for the moment. We don't need to worry about them. We don't need to worry about the CSS files. We don't need to worry about this test. The 2 ones that we can focus on for the moment are app.js and index.js. So let's have a look at index.js first. The important thing about this file is these 2 lines. There's a bunch of, the first two are just including or importing React for it to work. And notice the way that we'll now be using so the way that we're going to require files or require packages, we can use import something from, all right? Or if it's just CSS, we can just import it directly. So this is using ES6 modules, all right? Import from, rather than the Node.js way of doing things, which was require and module exports. So the important thing about index.js, this is essentially the entry point for a React app. What this does is, this line might here be familiar to you, all right? Document get element by ID root. So whenever you were trying to grab things when you're doing things in the thermostat challenge, you had to target things on the page, select them, and then update them. And the same thing still applies in React. There's just a bunch of extra things around it. But what this is doing here for the moment is saying, we're going to render. Don't worry about this strict mode thing. We're going to, I think I still need this comma, but fine, I'll put it there. We're going to render the app element, and we'll talk about where this comes from. We'll render it in this element root. So where is this get element by ID root? Well, in the public folder is your index.html. So if you think back to thermostat challenge, you had an HTML page and you had some JavaScript that you loaded in it. So the way that React's going to work is we start off at the index.js, we grab anything from the page, and then we insert all of the React into the one element. So let's go look at the index.html, and you'll see here in the body, there's a bunch of extra stuff here. You can not worry about most of it and just think about this body. There's only one element here that we need to worry about, which is that div root. So we're not going to add anything here. We're always going to add everything to as components. Well, I'll talk about that in a second. So this is your HTML page, but we're not going to add things to this HTML page. The reason for this is React components coupled together HTML and JavaScript. So beforehand, we were doing them separately. So if we have a look at the thermostat example, I can't remember, let's have a look at it. Let's get rid of all of this. You had an HTML page where you were adding things directly to the page, and then you had some kind of a JavaScript object, and also some JavaScript like events things. So you had three different places. You had the HTML page, you had some kind of object that holds state, like the temperature, and then you had something that was driving behavior, right? The events and event listeners and things like that. Now, the way that React wants to do it is say, let's not add things to HTML, and let's not create separation between all of these things. Let's just wrap them all together into a component. So we don't add things here. The way that React works is we're going to insert what we need into this page. And so we see here it has an ID of root, index.js takes that element, document element by ID, and then injects your app. So we don't really touch this. This is just the way that React's going to work. React takes your components and then adds them to the document. So we don't touch HTML, we don't touch index.js for the most part, for the moment. All right, so we have to look at what this app element is. In React, we denote an element, a component by sort of this syntax, right? Opening little thingamajig and a closing one with the /. And we give it an uppercase here. And we can see from line 4, this is where we import it from. So again, we're not going to retouch this file, and we don't touch the index.html file. All we do, we're going to add components, and then we add all of our components to the page. So let's have a look at the app component. The app component, let's remove a bunch of this because we don't really need it. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of the link. Let's get rid of the image, which is going to have a simple paragraph in here. So let's quickly see what actually that did to That's now our React app. Edit, source app, and save it to reload. Let's go back and have a look at it. Good morning. How was your Saturday? Okay, so you can see just updates on reload. We don't have to do anything, which speeds up the development. You have to quit any servers and get it booted up again. So this is a component. And for the moment, we're going to deal with components, and I'll talk a little bit more about components tomorrow morning, the different kinds of components that we can use. Now, let's go back and see these side by side. This is our app component, the top level app component. And here, the index.js is what takes that app component and renders it into that element root. All right, so if we inspect this page and open up the body, you'll see that there is a root element here, which inside of it is where we have loaded our app. All right. So we take this root, we don't add anything else. There's no other element in the body apart from the root element, because everything is loaded inside of this element. So we load our app inside of this element. So if we want to add more elements or more components, we can definitely do so. And the way we do so is, again, we leave the app component here and we add more things to this app component. So before I do so, I'm going to I kind of wanted to test drive this, but let's assume. No, let's stay with this. So let's have a look. What I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to add a simple component to this. But before I do that, I want to set up Cypress as my testing framework. And all I want to show is hello world on the page. So let's go back to here. I'm going to show, I'll keep this text here, but above it, I'm going to show hello world. All right, that's going to be a very simple React app, very static, doesn't do anything. It's just a component that shows some text. All right. And let's see what this process looks like to add a component in a test-driven way. So we're very familiar by now with Cypress, at least the process of installing Cypress. So let's install it. And let's go ahead and open it up. Oops, open. It's going to go through some setup that I need. It'll create a bunch of where are you getting this all from? You haven't created the thing for me. Oh, there you are. That took some time. All right. There you are, Cypress. Take your time. Okay, here in the cypress.json configuration file, remember that we need to set that base URL. And it's, what port is it? Localhost 3000. So whenever we use Cypress, always try and set that base URL to something that's static like this. HTTP localhost 3000. Okay, so that's good. And then we need to, I'm going to get rid of all these because I don't like the loads. Go away. Okay, I want to please create. There we are. Let's call it hello world spec. Okay, so this is a normal Cypress test. All I want to do is visit the page and expect there to be hello world. All right. Again, Cypress is entirely agnostic to what languages are used. It just automates the process of being a user. So make sure we have that feature level test. When a user visits the page, it's then they see a greeting. So here, let's move that inside here. Visits the index, and we're going to get an element. Let's give it an ID of greeting, and it should contain hello world. All right, quite straightforward Cypress test. And we're just making sure that we're driving under the element using a test. We visit the home page. There should be something on the page with an ID of greeting that it says hello world. So let's go. Hello. Where are you? You're not here. All right, let's reopen you. Oh. There you are. So we haven't written it, so it shouldn't be there. So we visit, and it shouldn't find anything on the page that says has an idea of greeting. Cool. So this is where at the moment we have a test, a failing test, which is good, and we have some text here. Now there are two kinds of tests. There's a feature level test using Cypress, but we also have a component test. So think of this as the difference between like a unit test and a feature level test. In React, we don't really have units, we have components. We call them component tests. So we can have a look at a kind of component test. And this is introducing you to a different set of tools to help you test drive. At the moment, it can be very simple. And all you need to do is have a look at the app.test for a way to thinking about, or just a copy, how a test works. And we'll get more familiar with this morning, this afternoon, over this week. So the test, there are two parts to this. We're going to have a test runner called Jest. Jest works behind the scenes. We don't need to worry about it for the moment. And really the test framework going to be used is called React Testing Library. So actually this is already failing because I've changed this text here. So the way that we can run this test, and this is important, we know that we've been able to run Cypress. Cypress is quite familiar. I'm going to open up a new tab and npm test. We have a look at where this comes from. npm test then runs React scripts test. That's abstracted away from us, and let's have a look at what it does. So it launches you into this environment. Now, let's have a look at this. So at the top here is a test that it ran, and it's telling me it's failing, and specifically what was the test that failed. It gave me the error message. It gives me a printout of what part of the code, the source code. It gives you a printout of the corresponding test code. So a lot of useful information here. So this is the what the browser was at that moment in time, what the sort of fake browser was looking at. And this is the test, the line that was failed at. This is the test summary, and you can essentially keep this running. So there's a few different options here that you can just watch, and it will constantly run your tests in the background, which can be quite useful. Let's make sure this test passes by just making sure I change this text to, I'll show you this test on the right. Oh, get rid of that. So this is the component test, and this is the component that it's trying to test. All right, I import that component app. This is the component. And then it tries to render it. And then it will try and say, okay, once it's rendered, I want to get that text and expect it to be available. So this is one of the main ways that we're going to test our component, just by the text. We're not going to worry about most other things about this component, like what element it is, or whether it's a paragraph or a span. We just want to see from the perspective of the user, what do they see? So in order to change this, I can just grab this text, and a little bit of test after, but it's fine. And the match here is saying it should be case insensitive. I can just keep it as a normal string if I wanted to, all right? But we'll stay with that for the moment. Renders app component. So I'm going to go back and have a look at that the test. And you can see it's now passing. I didn't do anything. It just ran again. And if I see a small little, like I missed out, you can see a fail. It says, you can see it's missing this slight character here, all right? Okay, so we're having a look at this at the moment just to see there's a second testing approach that we're going to use. We know how to use Cypress, but we're also going to component test. Each component should have a corresponding set of component tests, and our application should have a set of feature tests that get automated by Cypress. So let's have a look at adding another test that asserts very similar to this, that we have a message saying, I don't know, hello world. All right, and we're going to create a new component for it, and we're going to have a look at that approach. So I'm going to create a file. I'm going to use the same naming convention, app.test.js. I'm going to use greeting. That's going to be a many-line component, like this. And without thinking too much about it, I'm just going to grab everything from this test and whack it into here. I'm going to change the element, the component name from app to greeting, because this will be my new component. You don't need to include the .js, but you can if you wanted to. Test renders a greeting message. I'm going to render my greeting element, my greeting component. And it's not going to, I'm not going to call it a link element. Let's just call it like that. And I expect there to be something that says, hello world. All right, still at the moment, very straightforward. There are a few things going on here about the import, about how testing library works. We'll have a look at the docs. I'll share those docs about how, so you can have a look at different ways we can use this. But at the moment, we're trying to keep things simple, just showing the flow of this. I import my test framework stuff. I import my component, and then I set up my test. And the part of my test is the setup here, which is let's render the component. Render comes from React testing library. Screen comes from React testing library, and I query it to say, okay, let me find that text. If it exists, great. Otherwise, it will fail the test. So currently, it should be failing. I've got one failing test and one passing test. Give you a message, it can't find the .greeting because I haven't written my component yet. So it gives me a useful error message here. I'm still passing my top level app test. So let's create my component. Let's create a very simple greeting component. It's empty. Let's put this on the left-hand side. So source on the left and test on the right. And let's have a look at the layout of the app component. So the main thing here is that it's a function and it exports it. And it's got a return method here. I'll talk a little bit more about the return method as part of the React sort of component lifecycle tomorrow. For the moment, the key components of this component is that we have to export it, and it's a simple function with a return statement. So function greeting is a function. It's got a return statement, and I export it. So those are the main parts. If we have a look back at the failing test message now, we need to add some stuff inside of my return statement. Here, we should always be returning one HTML element. You can nest more things inside of it if you want to. So let's do a very simple one, and let's just simply return a heading. Now, if some of you might be thinking, why am I adding HTML inside of JavaScript? And this is what I mean by components coupling together HTML and JavaScript. Now, this is not real JavaScript. This is a React way of what we call JavaScript X, right? JSX. This is a format that takes this and then turns this into real JavaScript. So we can use JavaScript, all the way things that we know, but we can also add HTML inside of it. There are some rules about how you do this. So you can keep it as a .js, that's fine, but underneath the hood, React looks at this and turns it into JavaScript, right? This is not real JavaScript. You can still use it as such, because this wouldn't make sense otherwise. In the same way like this doesn't make sense if it's just normal JavaScript. But we can use JavaScript in all other ways. Everything that you might expect, you can still use. So we add HTML here and return a heading. And what is the heading that we want? Hello world. Cool. So now passing my component test, a quite simple one. All it needs to expect is that it has that text. And if I go back to my feature test, I still actually need an ID of greeting, so let's make sure that is there. My component test is still passing. And still not finding it, and there's one main reason for this. My component test is passing, but if I have a look at my app doesn't do anything. It doesn't show my greeting elements. The way that I add my component into my application is by importing it. And then adding it somewhere within this return statement. So let's do it before, and the way that we add an element here is by using the open and then close like this. We put the component name here. This, when React sees this, will render this component. So it sees this, knows it's a component because I've imported it, and then renders it. So it will call automatically the return method of my function, of my component. In the same way that when I call render here, it renders it, React will render it for you. So you can nest components within each other, and they will all then cascade and call the return methods, which will show what it should look like. So we have a passing Cypress test. Okay, so this was to demonstrate the flow of test driving a React app. There's a bunch of new things in here. So let's try and walk back from the beginning of the things that I did. The first thing was to go through and set up. So we ran React create React app, and then I started the development server. So this is when I can see it. Where are you? Here. So this is my live server that I can then update and change as much as I want. And then I had a look at the sort of flow in which React works, focusing on, first of all, the index.js. This is how React updates the page. It finds that root element and then loads your top level app. Your app then loads the rest of it. It renders the other components that you've added into it. So this is the entry point to your application. Again, we don't change this, and we don't really change the HTML either. The HTML, this document, is from the public folder index.html. Right? There's a lot of things that come by default. All we need to worry about for the moment is just this element here. Right? Again, we don't add anything to it. We just know that this is where React inserts all of the components that you've written. It loads the app element. The app element, you can try and simplify as much as you want, but as always, it's a component that has a return statement, and within that return statement, it has one element that might be nested. It might have a few more inside of it, and we can add more of our own components wherever we want. So we set up a Cypress test. And then we thought about how do we use a component test to mirror the kind of unit testing that we've been doing before. In a component test, we had a look at the example app.test. And we had a look at the first two lines. This imports our test framework and then imports the subject under test, the component we want to test. And this sets up the actual test where we render the app. We have a look at it. We can query it. Get by text is probably get by text and to be in the document are probably the main sort of ways that we're going to test at the moment. We'll be able to have a look at a few different query methods. Get by text or get by other things. And we'll have a look at the documentation. I'll send that across. But for the moment, we just copied it across. We had a look at making sure that we were starting on some of the text that was available to us. So we did it again using a greeting test to set up a greeting component. We import the greeting component, we render it, we search for the text that we want, and we expect that it's available. After we have this failing test, we can then go ahead and write our component. And the component quite simply was a function that has a return statement, and we export it. In our return statements, we can write HTML. We always need to have at most one element that we return. We can have nested elements, but we have to have one element that we return. And then we add in this component into our top level app component. And then React takes care of the rest.
Sorry, could I ask one question?
Yeah.
Sorry, you know the div in the header, more than and lower than. What are those things called? So I can search them up on the internet. The actual div. What is that called?
This is an element name.
Okay.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. Anyone? Any other? Now's a good time to pause. Other questions or thoughts going through this?
So in your like app.js, does it always need to return like the div class name equals app? Does it always need to be like a div element?
No, You can return anything that you want, as long as it's one element, and you can nest other elements inside of it. Every component needs to return one element, but you can nest inside of it. Class name is entirely up to you. Class name again is JSX. So if it wasn't class name, normal HTML is something like this, class. But class name is the way that JSX does it. So always double check that part of it, and this is just a way to style it. So I think app.css has a class name like this, so you can select the class name. CSS is a set of rules with a selector at the top, and this is the selector that says find anything with a class of app, and then apply this rule, where this is the property and this is the value. So it doesn't really matter again, it just follow the rules of a component, which is, it just has to be one element, and that's it. Does that help, Colin? Cool.
Is it better practice to create as many like JavaScript files as possible, or like is it better to nest them, say like within that div there, if that makes sense?
Repeat that question. I think there are two parts to that question, maybe.
Okay, so you know how you said, well, it can only be one HTML element in that function.
Yeah.
So then you'd create another JavaScript class like you did with greeting.javascript.
Yeah.
Is it like better to create more JavaScript files and then import them like you have, or is it better to try and nest as much as you can before you create another?
Really great question. And think of it a little bit similar like the modularity that we're doing object-oriented design, where rather than use one class, you want to split it up and have like a few smaller classes. Same approach. Rather than one huge component, you want to split it up and have smaller components. The directory structure here at the moment is all on sort of like very shallow. At some point, it will be easier to organize it, but let's have a look at different approaches tomorrow. For the moment, just keep everything in the source directory like this.
So when you say each thing returns one element, is that because it has to, or is that for like encapsulation reasons?
It has to. It won't know how to render it otherwise. So it will receive an error if you try to add like another element here. It'll be like, sorry, I don't know what you're doing. So it always has to be one.
Cool.
Wait, so technically you would only have, say you had another one that isn't called greeting, like, I don't know, breakfast, and then you wouldn't really have that paragraph one that says good morning. That would be in breakfast. You see what I mean? And all that line would say
exactly. So you could wrap that in a component and call this, as you might have mentioned, breakfast.
All right, and you just have, okay, I see.
Yeah, and then you do the same thing, import it from the top and add another thing here. Yeah.
Will this file always have like all your things in it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. More questions, more thoughts. Okay. So I'm assuming there's still loads of questions, right? But the best thing to do now is just to go try it, and then we'll go through a round of questions after lunch. All right. So keep it super simple. All I want you to do is add a component that says hello world, but test drive it. Set up your Cypress test and set up your component test for it. I'll send across some useful links for React Testing Library about making sure you have access to that documentation, know where it is. You know where documentation is for Cypress, you've already done that. And I'll upload this video to YouTube as soon as it's possible, all right? the first step is create a React app. What did I do? I did create a React app and then name of the directory you want. Then I did npm start to load it. We also installed Cypress and then opened it. What other things did we do? That's about it in terms of commands, right? And then your main other one was npm test for the component test. Cool, that should give you enough to start work on. I'll send across some documentation. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to end this call so I can upload the screen recording. Have a go, have some fun, talk in tech help. If any, I assume there'll be like bugs and things that happen. So send messages onto the tech help channel, help each other out, and I'll be monitoring it as well. And then let's convene at 2 o'clock for peer groups and 2:20 to go through questions, right? Cool. I expect there to be a lot of new things, so work your way through slowly and have some fun. All right, bye for now.